Good morning or good evening, whichever it is for you. I'm Dr. Brent Bost for WiseOB today. This is the first recording for WiseOB that I've done, and you can tell that it's my first recording because the lighting is awful. See the down lighting here, but that's so I can see my notes. I'm an old dude and I have to see what I'm talking about. The second one is I've cut the top of my head off with this screen, but I have an ulterior motive for that, and that is because I don't have any hair. And the lighting is getting worse and it's awful, but I can't really fix this problem yet. So for the short run, I just cut the top of my head off. How about that one? Anyway, I'm always looking for solutions. That's what we're here to offer today as well. We're going to talk about lowering prescription drug prices. This is an area near and dear to my heart. I've been prescribing medication for 30 something years, and now I'm taking them as well. I've seen this from both sides. As a provider trying to get the patient the right medication, in spite of the insurance company sometimes fighting them or the cost of the drugs being too high. I've also provided prescription drug coverage for my employees. We had 50 plus employees in my group of 7 docs and 3 nurse practitioners in Southeast Texas. And the prices got to be tough, so I see it from both angles, I believe. I also have a background in business. I have an MBA and a CPA license and a master's in healthcare administration, as well as being a physician. So I think I have a unique perspective, and having studied this for a while, I think I've got some really good ideas that we could implement fairly quickly and get drug prices down. Okay, so let's talk about that. There are a few points that I think are the major ones. We may find some different ones soon. Now, you will notice when I look at my paper that you can see my bald head worse. But anyway, I'll work on this. I'll get better as we keep doing these, right? Just to say. And the backlighting sucks too. But anyway, one of the big things that we can do to help lower our drug costs in America is to quit subsidizing the drug costs of other countries. And much like we do in defense, we spend 3.2% of our GDP on defense spending. The Netherlands spends like 1%, 1.3%. Sweden spends 1% on defense spending. Well, we spend 3 times what they do because we defend them. So we supplement their cost, right? They do pay to NATO, and we're trying to get them to pay more of that expense. But currently, those are the numbers. Sweden pays 1% of their GDP to defense. Well, similarly, they spend a lot less on healthcare than we do as well. And one of the big reasons is because we subsidize their drug costs. And so we got to quit doing that. If you look at it from the drug company's perspective, and I don't think, although you've heard some terrible examples recently in the news, I don't think drug companies are big and evil companies trying to screw us all out of our money or make us unhealthy, trying to keep us healthy, and therefore playing it on both ends. We'll give you this drug to make you healthier, quote unquote, with a side effect that'll make you need another drug to fix it. So it's not the evil conspiracy that you probably think it is when you watch the news. Drug companies are in a business, and it's a business of medicine, and it's a business that has extremely big winners and also some very big losers. There's a lot of cost involved in bringing drugs to market. Research and development is a huge cost for all of these drug companies, and they have lots of losers. So these drugs they spend millions of dollars on never make it to market, and they have to compensate for that by charging money in the profitable ones and get their money back. The other problem that they face is a lot of the global economies of the world have socialized medicine now. So UK, Sweden, they just say, we're going to pay $1.50 for that pill, and that's it. We don't care. And if you're not going to provide it, then we're not going to take it. Even worse, look at things like vaccines, right? So vaccination, we're not paying full price for that, or we're only going to pay what we think is the wholesale price because that's all we have in our budget. Our budget is fixed and we don't have any money for that. So that's their cop-out answer to why they pay less for drugs. Well, look at the drug company's perspective. What are they going to do? Say, well, you can't have it. Too bad. They feel bad about that. And again, look at vaccines as an example, because there's a spillover benefit to this country to being vaccinated in other countries, right? We've seen a lot of that lately with measles, people who are not vaccinated elsewhere, bringing it here. So we definitely want them to have that type of medication. But all medicines, for example, I mean, their sense of social awareness and responsibility makes drug companies want to provide the drugs to these other countries, but the other countries are getting them at cost, or cost plus a very tiny margin. Well, what's the drug company going to do? Well, we're going to let those countries have them, but we're going to have to make it up in the U.S. market. And that's what they do. So we've been subsidizing the drugs of other countries for a long, long time, and I think that needs to quit. I don't like price fixing. I'm a free markets kind of guy. I do not like the government to step into markets that are working. But this market is not working. Okay, it is not it is not a normal marketplace. The laws of supply and demand do not set the price in this situation, right? Now, the government can do it. Again, that kind of takes the free market away out of the free out of the market, so to speak. But this is not a truly competitive market. And one of the things that's wrong is this type of pricing. And so I think rather than fixing a price, the government could set a most favored nations kind of clause, which in contract terms means, or simple language, contract terms would be the most favored nation. Contract terms would be, look, wherever you get the lowest price, wherever you made your best deal, we want that plus 10%. That's the only price we're going to pay. We're not paying any more than that. Or we're only going to pay 7% or so above the average lowest three prices you get in the world. Something like that. It allows for a margin of profit because you can't keep a company open if you don't have profit. But it keeps it from being one that we all pay. Because Americans, we subsidize the world for a lot of things. Defense was one we mentioned earlier, but also drug prices and healthcare. And that's also in devices as well, medical devices. But I'll come to that in a second. But one of the first big things we could do to lower drug prices in this country is set a most favored nations clause, maybe with a small percent of margin above that, for the drug companies. And that's the most they could charge in America. And that would save us a lot of money, I believe. The next thing we could do to lower drug prices in America is to establish something like a needs committee inside the FDA. You may not be aware about the launch time or the ramp up time it takes for new medications that are on the horizon to actually make it to patients. It takes years, and the patents expire at about 10 years after the molecule has been discovered. So drug companies do operate on a very short margin. That's another thing that could be adjusted, is the timing of generics. It sounds good to have generics early in the game. And you see generics coming out of Canada and other countries, but they may not be manufactured to the same specifications that the FDA requires in this country. So you sometimes get bad drugs in that generic. So that's a really slippery slope, and one that we have to look at a little more carefully before we go there. But back to the needs committee idea. Research and development costs are huge for drug companies. The drug companies in 2018 spent $90 billion on R&D, research and development. $90 billion. If we could cut that in half, couldn't that money be used to give them the profits that they need and thereby lower drug prices at the same time, right? So they get their same margin, but on a lot less cost. And therefore, we'd be in much better shape. Currently, we do subsidize the drug companies in their ability to do research and development by giving them tax breaks, okay? I think those are probably still okay, but I'd like to look at that a little closer before I made that a definitive statement. But I do believe that we need to strongly consider some type of needs committee to cut the cost, the excessive cost of R&D. A few years ago, I noticed that there were 6, count them 6. That takes a hand, and actually takes 2 hands, unless you want to use your foot, which of course you could have a hand and a foot, but it takes 6 fingers or toes or both, some combination, to count the number of drugs we had to treat overactive bladder in America. 6 different drugs, all with research and development costs, all with terrific marketing costs. And they fought each other tooth and nail to get that market share, right? Because that's how they make their profit back on their R&D. Well, somewhere along the way, as the FDA was looking at these drugs in the pipeline, because again, it takes years, someone could have said, you 3 companies over here, your drugs look very, very similar. Could you guys work together and cut R&D costs and co-market the drug and still make some money, but not cost us a fortune in R&D? The answer is probably yes. There are currently 4 hepatitis C treatments that have just come out. 4 of them, count them, 4. All incredibly expensive drugs, a little different. Each one's a little different. I'm not saying you only need one because people are allergic to one, might need another one. So this is a committee that would have some incredibly important decisions to make. But if they could see things in the pipeline and go, hey, we got 4 drugs coming, let's don't do this. Let's you 2 guys get together over here and you 2 other manufacturers get together over there. We'll have 2 treatments for hepatitis C at half the R&D costs. Remember, this industry spent $90 billion in R&D last year alone. So if we could cut that number by a third or even a fourth, that's a lot of money. You could have a lot of cheaper medications or free pills for people who can't afford them, et cetera, et cetera. So Another way we could save money in this country would be to have a needs committee established within the NIH, CDC, FDA, wherever it's best set, probably the FDA in some combination of a science board that would be able to decide what's really a good combination of drugs to work on and what isn't, to set these needs in advance. The third major way you could cut drug costs in this country is to stop direct-to-consumer marketing, sometimes called DTC, direct-to-consumer or direct-to-patient marketing. Now, you know it works because that's why they do it all the time. I mean, the news time, the prime time television has drug ad after drug ad after drug ad, most of them treating the same conditions, and they're all different names. Like all the treatments for diabetes, for example, that are new and out there and wonderful and crazy weird. The ones for plaque psoriasis and other conditions. Well, think about it. If you're a patient and your psoriasis has been like 92% improved by your current medication, but you see a drug that might take you to 98%, wouldn't you want that drug? Of course you would. And if your personal costs are shielded by health insurance, man, it's even a better decision. Once I met my deductible, that $30,000 a year treatment looks pretty good to me, even though the one I'm on now is only about $2,000 a year. Hey, $30,000 treatment for 5 percentage points of improvement in how I feel and how I look. And you can't blame the patient for wanting it. It makes total sense. Plaque psoriasis doesn't really kill people. Very few of it does, that I'm aware of. But nonetheless, if you suffer with it, you want to get better. I understand that. I mean, I've had a chronic skin condition for about 3 years. It finally went away on its own like it was supposed to do. But for 3 years, I felt kind of like I was a leper. I had spots on my arm and stuff like that. So I do get it. I really do. And I want to alleviate patient suffering. That's what I took an oath to do 35 years ago or so. But that's going to bring in the next question. So let me come back to that in a second. And that is, how do we define health and how much are we all willing to pay for it, for each other and for other people? But the point is, the direct-to-consumer marketing is only present in a couple of countries in the world. Everyone else kind of figured this out early. Now, the drug companies are not going to like this. They're going to fight all the suggestions I've given you because no one in business wants to be more regulated. They want to be less regulated unless that regulation protects them. And I think some of these things would help them, but they aren't going to like the pill when they have to swallow it. You know what I mean? They are not going to like this medicine because it's going to taste bad. But the reality is, I think we all need to work on the situation, and that's something that drug companies and device manufacturers both could do. This also applies to robots. Robotic surgery. Man, doesn't that sound sexy? I had my hysterectomy with a robot. Whoa, baby, I had my robotic surgery. Oh. Yeah, and it sounds wonderful, like lasers did 20-something years ago, right? But the reality is, robotic surgery has not been shown to be superior to the older technologies, which were all fairly expensive too, by the way. They have not been shown to be superior to the older technologies, except in a very, very few fields, like cancer and specifically prostate cancer. Radical prostate surgery appears to be better with a robot in a lot of cases. There was a recent study that just came out showing that cervical cancer patients had better outcomes for radical hysterectomy through an open procedure, the good old-fashioned big cut, than they did by robotic surgery. Now, I haven't had a chance to fully vet that article. There may be some problems with it, but it would appear, again, if there's a superiority for the robot, it's very minimal. Let me tell you something, sports fans. That robot costs $2.5 million to get. So every hospital that has one has coughed up, either through philanthropy or their own money, $2.5 million for every freaking robot that they have. Well, I know hospitals that have 2 and 3 of them. Do they really need those? A lot of surgeons like them because they're kind of cool. It's like a video game. It's kind of fun. You can sit through the procedures so your feet or ankles or back hurt at the end of the day. Hey, I feel better doing my surgery with a robot. $2.5 million later. Yeah, now you can amortize that over a lot of different cases, and it's not quite so bad. Insurance companies figured it out a long time ago. They told hospitals, we're not paying more for robotic surgery because it's not been proven to be superior. And that is absolutely correct. That's the right thing to do. We're not paying extra for something that's not giving extra, except in a very few cases. But couldn't we kind of spin the wheels of time back a little bit and go back to about 10 years ago when robots first came out and gone, 1, let's research them hard. 2, let's only put them in major medical centers until we prove that the robot is superior in outpatient outcomes, and then we can expand that to smaller marketplaces. Oh no, Hospitals use them as a marketing tool. There are robots every 3 or 4 miles in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I work. There's hospitals in Southeast Texas that I used to work at that have 2 robots, and they're trying to get one down the street because they want to compete with each other. Hospitals use these to compete. Well, those competition dollars are not paying off for patients. Let's get real, okay? That kind of crap has to stop. And the Da Vinci robot people really probably should be ashamed of themselves by the way they marketed that. Here's some cool technology, doctor, that you'll like. Yeah, but what is it cost effective? I don't know. Yeah, That's the whole problem, was we didn't know. Now we do know, and a lot of my young residents have not been trained to do anything but robotic surgery. So that's got to stop now. So this kind of crap needs to go, okay? And that's why, unfortunately, we do need some government regulations. Now, my Republican friends would go, you don't tamper with free markets. Hey, sports fans, this is not a free market. Free markets require uniform information to all parties involved. Do you think this is uniform information to everybody involved? Patient, hospital, provider, insurance company, society at large? Hell no. That's why I'm here on the internet trying to tell you something. This is a flawed system, and we got to fix that. I don't think we want to overhaul it, throw out what we have, and that's the next video I hope to do on how do we really lower healthcare costs overall. How do we approach the healthcare dilemma? That's my next video. But right now, let's focus on drug costs, device costs, and the problems that brings to the overall economy of healthcare. And we can do a lot of things to lower prices and make this a better system and use our resources more wisely. So limiting direct-to-patient and direct-to-consumer marketing would really help lower drug costs in this country. Then the emotional decisions wouldn't be there. Patient comes to their doctor and says, I really want this new treatment. If the doctor can get it for you, the doctor will, because the doctor is your advocate. They're the patient's advocate, not the insurance company's advocate. But physicians also need to become more health system advocates. Why are we spending money on that? Are you sure you really want to triple the cost of the system for a cure or a treatment that only improves you by 3 or 4 percentage points? And the reality is we should not be doing that. And I don't want insurance companies to be the ones to make these decisions because they're very impersonal deciders. I think this should be something that physicians and patients decide together. Now, that brings me to the final thing that we need to talk about briefly now, and again, more so in a later video. And that is, if you really ever want to cut healthcare costs, if you ever really want to impact this hard, because remember, prescription drug prices or prescription drug costs are only 9% of your healthcare dollar in America. 9%. So even if you could drop it by 30%, you've only impacted overall healthcare costs by 3%. 3%. Well, that'd be helpful, but healthcare prices are soaring at much higher rates every year. So what's your next trick would be my question. So the reality is the hardest questions are the ones that we're going to come up with right now. And that is, how do we define health? What is healthy? Well, let me read it to you. The World Health Organization, that's the WHO, and I often say, who? Because who gives a rat's ass what these people think? If I wanted to practice in a second or third world country, I'd have gone there, okay? But nonetheless, the WHO feels like they have to step in and tell everybody how to do everything. Yeah, interesting. That's stupid on a stick, but don't get me started. Anyway, the WHO says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Man, that made me feel good just saying it. But do you want to pay for that for everybody? That would be incredibly expensive. This brings up the economic question. I actually have an economics degree, sad to say, and I'll say some things wrong. So if you have an economics degree, forgive me if I don't say it right. But the economic question is, how do we spend our limited resources on our unlimited wants and needs? That is the deal, man. If you give human beings the chance to have something better at the same cost, do you think they'll take it? Well, heck yeah, they will. That's human nature, right? So we're willing to spend all the money we want on our own health. That's cool. I'm willing to help you out as long as it doesn't cost me directly out of my pocket. But the problem has been costing indirectly out of your pocket for a long time and in a lot of different angles. And again, that's the next video. But the reality is, the only way you're going to make this work, the only way to really cut costs in healthcare is to give less care. Ouch. You can cut inputs a little bit, cut doctors' salaries, cut what you pay hospitals. You can cut what you let drug companies make on their drugs. But at some point in time, those businesses are going to operate like a business. And if they can't make money doing business, they will get out of business. You see that in rural hospitals all the time. That's another fact of America being different than the rest of the world and why we do spend more money on healthcare. Again, that's the next video. So the big, critical, tough decision is, how do we define health? What is health? Okay. And I think that's a decision you want doctors and politicians and good old people on the street, insurance companies, employers, all to sit down in a big room and go, okay, what's health? What's the cost of providing health? And how much of this are we willing to foot for each other? And that's a big deal. That is a huge question. That is probably the question of the century, is what is health? Right now, our definition of health is pretty much anything goes, and that's going to have to quit. Okay, we're going to have to stop that. So we're going to have to come up with something that saves resources but keeps people healthy by the definition that we all agree to. That brings the second question, which is, how much are we willing to pay for each other for healthcare? So once you have the definition of health in your hand, we've all agreed to what health is, then we need to provide that for people who don't have any resources to pay. That's the poor, the indigent. And we have a lot of that coverage with EMTALA now, EMTALA. That's a law that doesn't allow transferring patients out of a hospital for being unable to pay for something, or if they're in active labor. And that law has helped a lot. Now, there are politicians who kind of hide behind that. If you listen to what they're saying very carefully, they'll say, well, I'm all for anyone who really needs health care to be able to get it. We already have that. If you're in an emergency or you're in labor, you're covered. You will stay at the hospital that you are currently located and be delivered or treated there. Okay. Now, there are flaws. There are times when people or when hospitals violate those rules in places, and you hear about a lot of those. But the vast majority of patient visits that are under EMTALA are taken care of appropriately because the fines are awful. Okay. So that safety net is there. Okay. So you heard it here first. You're going to hear a lot of politicians pretend to be for Medicare for all or whatever policy they want to put out there. But the reality is they're going to hide behind what that statement, in behind the scenes really meant when they said, I think anyone who really needs healthcare should be able to get it. Yeah, it's already there. So that doesn't cost them anything. That still doesn't fix the healthcare system, right? So again, we got to define health. We have to decide how much we're all willing to pay for each other's health, right? And then anything above that is going to be paid by you somehow. Maybe we share some of those costs, but again, those are the tricky decisions that have to be made collectively by all of us in the near future. That's people who are specialists in ethics, in religion, in politics, in law, in medicine, and good old people, just good old people, to sit down and talk about these things and try to decide what we're really willing to sacrifice for each other at those two levels, those who can't pay and those who do pay but don't want to pay for everything as it is now. Currently, we're at 18% of our gross domestic product every year on healthcare costs. Look at the Netherlands, 8%. Wow, that's a big difference. And politicians love to say, well, our health outcomes are so bad for that much more money. This is crazy. You need to elect me to fix that. Well, that's a pretty shallow analysis, and I'll come back to that in my next video. If you ever want to cut healthcare costs, truly cut costs, you've pretty well cut inputs down to the closest point, and you're very close to the end of that. So dropping doctor fees, hospital reimbursements, medication costs, et cetera, other than what I've just recommended to you, you're getting toward the end. 3%. If you cut pharmaceutical costs in this country by 30%, they only represent 9% of the whole healthcare dollar spent every year. So guess what? You only have a 3% savings for 1 year. What's your next trick, right? So if you ever want to fix this problem, the cost of healthcare, you have to define health, pay for what's health, and not us all collectively pay for what is above health, okay? And so those are the tough decisions. Until you the only way to save healthcare costs is to not give care like you're given now. Now, we may all collectively decide, hey, man, it's whatever you need, and we'll all pitch in until it gets paid. Hey, I'm okay with that, but it's pretty expensive right now, and businesses don't like it, and a lot of personal people and individuals who pay their own healthcare expenses don't like it either. And so I think we need to work on this. Anyway, that's just the obvious, is that we're going to have to slow the care down somehow and try to all agree with how we do that. So it requires a collective team effort, right? So that's the important thing to talk about. Those the extremes of life, end of life, and the very early stages of life. Those are the big ones where some costs can be saved as well. And those are, again, tough ethical decisions that we all have to make, not at the bedside, but using good common sense and care for each other. Decide how much of this can we afford to give? Is it part of our health definition? Maybe we can't keep resurrecting Uncle Joe, or can't spend $500,000 on a 22-week baby. Those are tough decisions to make, but those are the ones we have to make. That is, again, the next video. So let me give a couple of quick disclaimers. One, these are my opinions, Brent W. Bost, MD, okay, and I'm speaking for WiseOB, but these are not necessarily the opinions of the American College of OB-GYN, of which I'm board certified, or it's not necessarily the AMA's position. I don't care. I didn't ask them. I'm not calling them. If they don't like it, they can tough it. I sure didn't call the WHO. Who? Like, as in, who gives a hoot? That's the guys I don't really give a rat's ass about. But anyway, so I don't care what their opinions agree with mine or don't agree with mine. I'm just not saying, I'm saying that I'm not promoting these as their opinions, okay? Nor my employer, for that matter. And the other thing I need to let you know is that my wife works for a vaccine manufacturer. Big Pharma. He's been bought out. His opinions are biased. Let me tell you something. You can't buy my opinions. That's for sure, number one. And number two, if you were listening to this video, my opinions aren't particularly friendly to Big Pharma or to device manufacturers. So I don't think you have to worry about me being biased on that one. I gave you the truth, and the truth will set you free. So there you have it. All right. So I hope it's helpful. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope that you will, if you did, that you'll ship this video to your politician who might actually have a staffer look at it. Anyway, hopefully help shape the public opinion so we can make some better decisions and get this problem fixed. Keep the parts of the healthcare system we love and fix the parts that we don't like so much. All right. Take care, and we'll see you again soon in another video.